in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the KD Ratio Podcast. My name is Dylan.
And I'm Kyle.
And we also have...
I'm William. That was such a bad impression.
Yeah, well, sadly, Billy, he is not with us right now. He might join us later. He's currently busy with some business. So it's just going to be us two.
Taking care of business.
Business. That's right.
He's
just
got
us
a
two.
Side hustle.
Side hustle, right? Because
Yeah.
this is the main hustle.
The main hustle is obviously
the
this podcast.
This is where we make the big bucks. You heard it here first.
You heard it here first. We make money on
We
this.
make $0. So
This is not an exaggeration. We have made exactly no money since starting this podcast because it's more of a hangout session than anything.
that's not an exaggeration, as he said.
Not even a
That
slight
is
one.
the truth. 100%. Well, anyways.
I quit my job for this podcast, and we've made no money in 2 years.
He's sold himself, his body,
On the streets.
on the streets. So
And I put it all into the podcast.
we have a Patreon linked below that doesn't exist.
I have an OnlyFans, and my only subscriber is Dylan.
I fund him. You know, I feel bad sometimes.
And we put all of that $5 a month I'm getting into this podcast.
So, as you can see, diminishing returns.
Not doing too well, guys. Not doing too well. That's our advice section of the
Yeah.
podcast.
Thank you for tuning in. This has been the KD Ratio signing off. Bye, guys. But to get to the meat and potatoes of today, we have some reviews. First up to talk about, we saw Avatar and we saw Last of Us.
Yes, we did.
So let's talk about Avatar first.
Avatar first, huh?
Yeah. Me and Kyle saw it, and by the way, Billy is now here.
I've joined.
He has
I
joined.
snuck in.
Me and Kyle saw Avatar. We have two differing opinions. I wouldn't say hugely
not-
differing.
I don't think they're that different. I think
No.
the outcomes of how we felt about the franchise after the film is what's different.
Yes.
But
So, do you want to start us off, Kyle?
yeah, all right. I'll keep it.
Keep it PG.
I'll keep it PG. I wrote a ton of fanfic on
Hey,
Avatar:
Terry.
The Way of Water.
The way the water makes me wet.
Technically,
Technically,
it's
yes.
true.
So I thought, okay, so on a technical scale, very, very impressive. I don't think anyone was expecting otherwise. You know, that's something that James Cameron, his films have always done, is they've pushed the boundaries on like good quality, like CGI, and just pushing that envelope forward as far as films go. He's been doing that since the Terminator days. So that was, I think it's, honestly, I do think it's worth seeing on the big screen just for that alone. Story-wise, I thought that the writing was okay at best. It hit all the emotional points. It had a beginning, middle, and end. There were several moments where I definitely was feeling, very upset emotionally about something that happened on the film. But I don't think it was like anything to write home about. Like, I think that it wouldn't take a very skilled writer to be able to come up with this story. And I think that's, as far as like blowing my mind, I think the first one had a bigger impact on me than this one did. Because I think a lot of the impressive things about this film aren't the things that are cinematically very pleasing. Like water. The water is like completely CGI. It looks flawless, but like, it's water. You can get that same effect like in an ocean, So the fact that it is CGI and it's not real, that is incredibly impressive. But if you're going to spend that kind of money on making things look amazing and incredible, which this movie did have some of those moments for sure. I think the first one had more like awe-inspiring moments, like the floating mountains and the gigantic monstrous trees. And I felt like there wasn't as much of that in this movie because the whole thing took place on like a little village and surrounded like on an island, like in the water. Like it looked like you could have filmed this just like in Bora Bora. Like, you know, that's how I felt about it. But do I recommend you to go see it? Yeah, I think it's probably a 6 to 7 out of 10 for me. And it was still really good. I wouldn't call myself like a fan of the series really, because I don't imagine I'll be seeing this again unless it's like on and someone's like, oh, let's watch it, and we're in a group or something. Like, yeah, sure. But like, I don't consider myself a fan unless I leave that theater and I think I can't wait to watch that again. That's when I've entered fan territory.
Okay.
So what do you think, Dylan?
So, I mean,
Real quick, I want to ask Kyle a question about his.
Yeah.
So, do you think we're at a point of like really diminishing returns? So, like, obviously there was a lot of effort worked on this film just to make it a cinematic production. Do you think like the effort that they put into create the waves is like really diminishing returns, that they have to get so accurate and put so much work in to get like a 1 to 5% boost over maybe what it would take a fraction of the time to create in CGI?
It's hard to tell because this movie, and it made it. It did. I think they said it had to make at least $2 billion.
Yeah.
It's already there. It's already top 10, I think, all time.
Yeah. It's let's see, get an exact frame of reference on
I
the
saw
box
it at
office.
1.9 billion. I saw that
1.9. So it's actually, weirdly enough, it's like just making money like now, because I think they said it needed to make like, in order to be considered like a huge success, it needed to be close to 2 billion with how much that they've apparently how much they've invested and spent on it. So I don't know if that's actually like if you think about it as far as like returns, like Everything Everywhere All at Once. That movie made like $112 million, but against an all-in budget of like $5 million.
Well, I'm not thinking of like return financially. I'm thinking more like
technology.
Technology, like it takes, 20, I'm just throwing numbers out. It takes 20 hours to create like an average experience of like what it is to see water versus it takes 500 hours of highly skilled labor to make that water there 10% better. I think are we sort of in that level of CGI at this point now?
Is it worth it?
Yeah, diminishing returns from that perspective.
I think yes and no. I think the reason I think it's worth it for this film is not necessarily the water itself. It's like the things that are in it, like the creatures and I think maybe it would have been harder to film that in water and then like superimpose that digital animation into an already water scene versus just doing it all CGI.
Well, and
I don't know.
I've watched some of the visual artists react, VFX react videos that Corridor Digital do.
Yeah.
And I've really enjoyed them. I'd recommend them for people interested in that kind of stuff. But they've talked about Weta Digitals, who did a lot of the CGI in Avatar 2. I know there's multiple companies that they probably work with, but Weta, the reason they're so special is they actually came up with a program for the water. And so I think it's almost to the point, Billy, where I think they developed a program now that the water is the smallest problem in a movie like that.
Yeah.
Like they worked on a system to create such realistic water that's the smallest problem. As far as diminishing returns on water itself, the rest of it, I don't know.
I think it really comes down to, I can't answer that question if it's worth it or not, I don't know about that. But for me, like, if you're gonna spend that kind of money on that kind of technology, I want to see things that don't exist on Earth. I want to see something that's gonna blow my mind visually, and that's what I felt was just, maybe I've just been numbed down by all the craziness that Marvel has brought to the table, and not just Marvel, but everything in general. But I didn't really get that in this movie versus the first one. I did.
Okay. Dylan, what are your thoughts?
So I would say I agree with Kyle quite a bit. I think it's probably a 7 movie overall. I think there was some points that, like, it's okay. The movie itself, it's a sequel to Dances with Wolves. That's the concept of it, right? And it's not complex, and it kind of, there are certain things that I forgave it for because I haven't seen the first one in such a long time, and I think they're counting on that. Like, to give you an example, this isn't really a spoiler, but the first movie, at the end of it, Sully, Jake Sully, decides that, you know, he has to help them defend against the humans. Then at the beginning of this movie, he's like, you know what, we need to run away. And and then at the end of this movie, again, I'm going to spoiler for like 5 seconds. At the end of this movie, again, he goes, we need to fight. And it's like, okay, you just ended on the same exact conclusion as the first one.
His character progression went back to go forward again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think there's issues with it. But I think it was an overall good movie. And I would say I was still, I get what Kyle means by there wasn't that much fantastical, like cool things that you've never seen. But I did enjoy the water and the way of the water. I like seeing the sea animals and kind of the relationships with the sea animals and the super smart whales, and the whaling documentary in the middle of the movie was really cool. Yeah. But I overall enjoyed it, and I think the main difference where we stand is I came out of the movie as excited to see the future movies because, I don't know, my viewpoint is they're like, James Cameron already has plans for 5 of them, and this one made this much money, so we're gonna get those 5. It's like, if he has a plan, I'm down to see it. I mean, if I was entertained by this one, I'm sure it's only gonna get even more entertaining because they're gonna start building up a climax, you know, kind of like a multi-series movie where it's gonna be some insane stuff happening at the end. You have emotional characters that you're connected to that die, and so that's where I ended with this movie.
It sounds like the reason why this one took so long is, if they're truly doing 5 films, is they were ramping up the technical fidelity, like their capabilities to create this, and now they're just going to juice it for all this money. Because if you think about it, I mean, you pump 4 more, well, I guess if you include this one, 4 more movies out at $2, $3, $4 billion each movie. All of a sudden you've got, you know, 10, 15 billion dollars in revenue. Yeah. That's substantial. And you're not necessarily putting on the same kind of work that you took to kind of develop this.
To get it to that point. Yeah.
My question to you guys is, so just real quick, were your theaters full?
I went during the middle of a snowstorm, so no.
No? And then
mine was yours? I saw it in 3D IMAX.
Okay.
And I had a full theater.
To me, as an outsider, I've never been caught up in the whole Avatar thing. Never really saw the first one. There's a whole story there, but I felt like with Avatar 1, it was like a cultural phenomenon. Yeah. I remember like it was everybody was talking about it. It was like, have you seen Avatar? And I remember like my family like, get the cousins together. We're going to see it. You know, we'll go see it a second. It was like that kind of impact on culture. This one to me has been, and maybe obviously the internet's a much, much larger place, so it's easier to have like hollow pockets, and maybe I'm just not exposed to like Avatar content, but to me the impact has felt way less, in my opinion. And also I am just absolutely shocked that this is already at $2 billion, because I don't feel like it has had the same impact. When I look at the other movies that are on that list for $2 billion, it's like, holy shit, those were cultural phenomena. I don't know, Avatar 2, I haven't really, no one's reached out to me going, have you seen it? You know, it's just very, it's in a weird place for me in my head of like, are they faking those numbers? I don't know. Maybe it's huge internationally. Maybe that's...
It is bigger internationally. That's for sure. It's made a ton of money overseas. Also, it's one of the few movies that was approved in China. So there's a huge market in China that, for instance, Top Gun and like a lot of Marvel films were banned in China because of one reason or the other. So, you know, it's hard to say, but now that you say that, I actually think that this year, even though it hasn't made as much money, at least in the United States, Top Gun had more of a cultural impact.
Absolutely.
Than this movie.
Good point. That's a great example.
Yeah.
And that's on that list. It's at like what, 1 billion right now?
It's like 1.5 maybe.
Oh, is it all the way up
Avatar
there?
passed it.
Avatar did pass it though.
But like in terms of impact, I mean, I had family members call me like, that was like a conversation you get to dinner like for Sunday dinner. People are like, wow, what a movie, you know. Avatar 2 just misses it.
Well, see, I wonder if it is those fans that originally saw it, they just went to see it. They didn't talk about it.
Well,
Yeah.
I went and saw it, and I didn't come out of it and like, hey, all you people.
Yeah.
Hey, all you people.
So, and like if you think about it, you said the cultural impact of the first one, right? Like your grandparents and all them went to see it. Well, not a lot of them use social media. So maybe that's the thing too, is maybe it's the people who saw the original aren't on social media much and then just saw it and they're like, oh yeah, that was good.
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
I do.
I don't know. It
I
is
do
weird.
think
It's definitely quieter. I feel
not
like.
being.
Like, how can you generate $2 billion and just be that?
Well, look at domestic box office for Avatar 2. Let's see what. Let's get a little bit more specific here on what we're looking up, because I do think that being open,
What the fuck is this?
it's definitely not 9.8,
Yeah.
59.8
Yeah.
million. It's got to be way more than that.
It's like all these, a million different articles from different like days. So
420 million at the domestic box office by New Year's weekend.
like, yeah.
So that's like literally $1 billion
In the last couple weeks.
Well, 450 million is the domestic,
Mm-hmm.
and 1.9 billion is the overall. So a lot of that's not even the U.S. that money's pulling in. I don't know for sure, but I think if you look up Top Gun's domestic, it's probably more.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah,
I would imagine it's mainly.
it's a very
domestic.
like an American film.
Yeah, that's
you know?
not getting approved in China.
Yeah, so China, I have the list up on IMDb. America was 134 million. China is 56 million. South Korea, India, Germany, France, so it goes down the list. But China was 56, so American domestic was still more than China.
That's a way old number. 56, 100. This one says that 450 million domestic alone.
Yeah, and this is taken again. I don't know what date this is, but this was when it was only at 1.4 billion.
Collider.
So 4.4 of that is domestic. So
Yeah, I don't know.
it looks like a 3 to 1.
Oh, that was opening weekend. Sorry.
This looks like a 3.
I was like, there's no way it only
yeah,
made
gross
50 million in the U.S.
So gross is 571 million. China
domestically.
is 214 million.
so
So
about
there's a
half.
lot of
Then
money.
France was a big fan too.
It's
Well,
just kind of
France-
it's just in a weird place for me. I honestly, if I didn't have this podcast and we were talking about it, this could have easily just passed up and I wouldn't have really caught on. Which is wild. I mean, obviously I heard about it like the release weekend, but it just passed
Yeah.
on. It's kind of weird how you can get isolated.
Yeah, sure. Well, you can also, the way that social media works
Mm-hmm.
is it's so tailored to what you're already interested
Exactly.
in. So if you're not interested in something and you don't click on something, it's just going to fade into obscurity.
And I found that like a lot of the shit that, I used to be exposed to just through like watching cable TV, like getting the commercials ran on that.
Yeah.
Which are pitched to a broad audience because it can't you can't specialize or target the ads for you. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, that is coming up. Or like I saw the new season 3 to The Mandalorian. Watching football the other night. If I wasn't, that's the only quote unquote cable TV I still watch, which is basically sports.
Yeah.
If I didn't see that, I would. I'm not really someone who
In that
searches Star
sphere.
Wars content. It's not going to get pushed to me. I could easily miss that.
See, so
It's
maybe
very
we're not in
wild.
the right sphere. Maybe we're
What
in
sphere? What sphere is that? Genshin Impact sphere?
No. It's
No.
probably older people. I don't know.
I don't think it, I mean, I don't know.
People who use Facebook.
I talked
James
to,
Cameron
so I have
fans.
I have a coworker I was talking to about it, and he was like, this is how he said it in a quote. He was like, no cap.
No
One of the
cap.
greatest movies I've ever experienced.
Oh my
No
god.
shit.
Yeah, and I was like, all right.
No cap.
No
if someone
cap,
said
huh?
that about Top Gun Maverick, I would be like, oh, okay. I understand.
Yeah.
But I mean, I haven't seen it, but
I don't think it's the greatest movie ever. I do think it was good.
I can see people feeling that way about
Yeah.
it. I can. But like for me, like there was so many like just tropes it fell into. There were so many like
it's like a video game. How many times do you say graphics don't matter? I feel like that's what film is at this point, at this level of fidelity. Graphics don't matter to an extent as long as the content is great. And when your content is graphics, it's one of those things that just like any other video game, you play once and you go, okay, great.
the only
nice,
thing that I
then you move on.
appreciate that they did with the villain in this one, and spoiler alert, is they gave, even though it was such a like cop out to be like, oh, he just happened to clone himself just in case he died, but is they gave him some nuance with the fact that he knows that his son
Is
is,
like
and it
yeah.
gave him some character. He wasn't just, even
Evil.
though he still played into that trope a lot, he wasn't just straight up evil. Like you saw some moments of humanity in him.
So let me, since we're going into spoilers, I want to ask you, Kyle.
Yeah.
This is also spoilers for Last of Us, episode 1. This is your warning. Leave.
All right, we're going.
Okay. So
Spoilers for Last of Us. an 8-year-old.
Jake's son dying did not affect me at all. Versus Last of Us in the first episode. I mean, this might be the emotional impact from the game. That still gets me. Like I tear
Yeah.
up a little bit when he's crying and holding his dying daughter, and I did not give a crap about Jake's son who
When
got
Jake,
shot.
when Jake Sully's son died, for one, I saw it coming a mile off.
Oh,
Like,
so much. He
it
got
was-
no character development. He had nothing going
He
on
was
in
the
his life.
least developed child of the three. His only thing was, I'm the oldest. I have to protect us. But like there was no real like. At least the middle kid had like a story arc.
Yeah.
you know. And then there's that whole thing
The
that
magic
she's
Sigourney
like
Weaver.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I guess you know. But yeah, same thing. I remember in the theater when I watched that, I could actually hear crying though. Like I could
What?
hear it, yeah. And I was like, really? Am I a terrible person? I can't be because I cry in movies all the time.
Yeah.
But this one didn't quite land. I also like some of the bad guys, like the whalers, like I hate when people are just evil for the sake of
Wait,
evil. You know?
Humans were evil. No redeemable part about being human at all.
There was like no redeemable qualities in anybody, and like they're like these animals, they're even smarter than us. After they killed one, they're completely sentient, and then they're killing them, and they're like taking the fluids from their brain.
Yeah, he's like they even
Because
they
this is-
compose music.
Yeah, they even compose music, and he's like, but you gotta do what you gotta do. He's like, and I'm like, there's no way you can get like 1,000 people or
Where's
however many people are on board with killing a sentient creature that's more intelligent than you are.
Well,
Like they did it just so that you could be pissed at them. I feel like there was no, and they had to just throw in this magic liquid that's
Yeah.
in their brain. It's the new unobtainium.
It's
it
always some
makes
shit
everyone
like that.
immortal.
It basically, if you drink this, you'll live forever, and it just
Yeah.
happens to be in these intelligent creatures' brains.
You couldn't like have them donate it. You have to like suck it out and it kills them.
Yeah.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong; I do believe that there are plenty of humans that would be all about
Mm-hmm.
that, but I don't think that there wasn't any like their approach.
Opposition.
Their approach was there was like one guy that was kind of like
Snarky.
he was kind of like, well, we're not good people
Yeah.
when we do this. And then as they're about to die, he's like,
I told you.
I told you so. And then like he dies and they all die. It just was like they didn't know how to make the villains seem villanesque. So they like were cartoon villains.
Yeah.
You know?
And
But aren't they a primitive species though? Maybe
No,
not.
they're
No.
in the movie. They go into it, and we're full blown spoilers right now. But they go into it, and
the
they
whale.
actually the whales. They have conversations, and they have life like they have like
democracy.
democracies, and they have like they come and visit the Na'vi like every so often, and they talk to them, and they hang out, and they had like one sister, like soul sister, It was a very sad scene, actually. That was more sad than Jake Sully's.
Yeah, seeing the whale and its kid be murdered.
Yeah. But in the movie, they make it very clear that these are not like a lesser species.
No, I'm talking about like the actual Avatar people.
The Na'vi?
The Na'vi.
Well,
Like,
they're-
aren't they more?
They're more primitive, but they're not unintelligent. They're
Yeah.
intelligent species. They just haven't developed technology yet in the way that humans have.
Another issue I have watching it was that, again, I mean, I think that's why the first one maybe worked better, is the opposition was more clear, like who was on Jake's side, and you saw that all humans weren't evil. There's no opposition in the human side, and I have a really hard time believing that, especially now in like today's social climate, how much stuff goes on about like, what we did to the Native Americans, and nobody is raising a red flag about what they're doing to the Na'vi.
Yeah.
Like the Na'vi, it's a story of Native Americans, but they're just being murdered, and you're telling me nobody. There's no like space PETA. There's no, no. We just
I just think, and don't get me wrong, I do think there would be a lot of humans that would be like that. But
maybe they don't get paid enough to
I'd
go to
like
that planet.
I'd like to think that there'd also be a decent amount of humans that would be against what is happening here.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to
Yeah.
think. But I wish they showed it. Or
They didn't show any of that. It
Yeah.
was humans bad, and there's like one snarky biologist guy who didn't really do anything except comment, "I don't like what we're doing here," and
he still did it anyway.
as he's still doing it, and it's, the villains for the most part were very one dimensional, except, like I said, I like that they added a little bit of nuance to the main bad guy with the fact that he has a son now, and even though he still kind of stayed fully evil in the movie, there was moments where like you kind of question it a little bit because you could
You can see his redemption arc coming.
I almost feel like by the end of the 5th movie he's going to be a good guy.
Yeah.
Like they specifically didn't kill him off
His
because
son
I think
saves him
Yeah.
so that he doesn't die, and then his son is still like, I hate you. And his son, it's just a silly concept of he's a human boy running around with these Na'vi, and he's got this gas mask on.
He could somehow keep up with them.
Yeah, it's like, why not just give him an avatar body?
Yeah, I don't know. I felt like they kind of put Neytiri, they kind of put her off to the side.
Yeah.
Like they didn't give her a chance to shine, and her only moments were like she was just being very aggressive, but they didn't really explain like
Her fight scene is pretty cool. On
they,
the
they
boat.
are, but like that part where she's about to kill
Spider.
for her own son,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, is that something she would do?
Well, yeah, and then you're getting me off on a whole tangent here. Spider. I felt like they could have better sold me on that he's a part of the Sully family. I feel like they don't give a shit about him.
Yeah, like Jake kind of does, but she does not. She's like, he's a human, therefore he's bad.
Well, and like so to set it up for you, William, the Jake's real kids are captured on the boat. Spider comes, finds Jake, and he's like, "Hey, I can get you in there. Like, I was on the boat. I know the layout. Let's go." So Jake's like, "Okay, let's go." They go together. They get split up at one point. To save the family. Jake finds his whole family, and they all regroup together, and they're all having this moment. He's like, "We're strong together as a family." Spider isn't there, and nobody is worrying about him. And I just
Except for the girl. She's like, "Where's Spider?" And he's like, "We're all here together." Like, basically like, fuck Spider.
But it's like,
He's like,
you're supposed to sell me that he's a part of this family, but nobody asks where he is in this important moment where everybody's like dying.
You guys still think this is a 7 out of 10?
I still
talking
do.
about it?
I do. I'm going on and I'm ranting.
Yeah, I'm like nitpicking. Like, just.
But one thing I will say, it's very emotionally driven, and I think that can be a good thing depending on what kind of experience you want to have. It's a beautiful movie. There's no doubt
How's the
about
soundtrack
that.
marry with the visuals?
The soundtrack is great.
Except for,
What?
I did not like The Weeknd all of a sudden in the end it's emotional, right? This thing.
Is that during the credits?
Yes. All of a
Okay.
sudden it's like this beautiful soundtrack, and then comes in. I think they could have waited to have that after, after like the
It plays the
instrumental song.
Starboy song.
Yeah,
I think.
I'm a motherfucking Starboy.
Is that really what they play?
No.
Okay. Because he's a star.
I'm an
boy.
Avatar boy. That's what I was.
I'm an Avatar boy.
That's such a long. But we can go for a long
Yeah.
time, so maybe we should shift gears now.
Yeah.
I'll let you guys take over this section because I haven't watched it yet.
So now we'll move on to Last of Us. Billy
Or
and
the
me,
first of us.
the first episode of.
I'm not worried about spoilers because obviously I played the game.
Yeah.
So
There's yeah.
I thought it was pretty good for a first episode. I thought it was pretty faithful. They did change I can only think of two minor things, but overall it has me excited for the new episodes. What do you think, Billy?
Yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. My wife, who never played the games, really enjoyed it. She thought she looked at me when she first saw the. I guess we don't know that they're called yet. The clickers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, no. There's what
the clickers are the ones.
The clickers are the ones that haven't been infected for like a few years, but
they'll actually one shot you in the game.
yeah. And then there's the bloaters, of course. But what are they? Do they call
Just
them
the
anything like just infected?
I think.
I think until but in the games you pretty much only come across clickers pretty much.
No, there's a lot of infected.
I felt like that whole
They
game was
become
dodging
so.
clickers.
They become so like inconsequential though towards the end that you're only worried about like
Yes,
clickers and
exactly.
the like.
How many shivs do I have?
Yeah. The other ones, you're just like, I remember towards the end of the game, I was just walking past them. I was like,
I'm very positive on it. I thought it was a enjoyable show. I thought it ran very parallel to the games, which the games were this incredible narrative story. So if you do that, I think people, especially the people who didn't play the games, will have a positive reaction to this. If I were to get nitpicky, just like you guys were with Avatar, I felt like the relationship between the father-daughter was much weaker than what it was in the games. I didn't feel the reaction or the weight of her dying. Although the actress did a great job during the death scene, like a very good job, parallel to the games, of like this panic, scream, and
The fast
worry, and yeah, exactly. Like you feel that, like, oh, this is chaotic. This is not like you're the best dad I've ever had.
Yeah. No, it sounds real.
It's like, holy shit, I got holy shit, I'm dying. I'm fucking 10. What? Wait, what? And then you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that from the game because, the game I thought it was just going to be stereotypical. Like, okay, I'm going to be going back and forth between the father-daughter this whole series, and we're going to have missions, and then it gets ripped out of your hands like within an hour of gameplay, and you're like, oh, welcome to this fucking shit. And then a time skip of 20 years, and you're like, wait, what? So I loved that in the show. I felt like Joel. What's it? Pedro
Pascal.
Pascal did a great job as Joel. I thought he doesn't. I don't see Joel in him. I don't. I see Pedro, which
the
is
Mandalorian.
Yeah.
which is fine. It didn't take anything away, but I don't think it was like. For me, it wasn't like, oh, that's Joel. That's exactly him. I felt like maybe Pedro's a little bit more rough. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Maybe that's not the right word, but yeah. I don't have any real hard complaints against it, except for the father-daughter relationship, and then of course what you shared with me, Dylan. So get into that.
Yeah. So the big difference, or it's still a minor difference. It's not that big, but that I noticed, because I played Last of Us so many times, I replayed it. It's one of the only games I've beat on the hardest difficulty, which was insanely hard. You have like 0 resources, and the hardest part is Sniper Alley with
God,
that
I can't
boulevard.
even imagine.
It's so
You have
hard.
to get perfect headshots on everything.
Yeah, and you have no ammo, and there's like these
Yeah.
raiders coming towards you, and meanwhile this guy's sniping you. But anyways, in the beginning, there's Joel is trying to get this battery for a car, and you never really learn any more about it throughout the rest of the game. but it just, it's his life at that time in the beginning. And they get duped by this guy. And, the guy beats up Tess, who's like, in the game, it's implied as his lover. In the TV show,
They get a cuddle session.
they get a cuddle session, but that's still kind of weird.
Apparently, the internet loved that.
Yeah.
They finally got what they wanted.
It was always like inferred.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, especially the line of like you own, like when she sends him off to protect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she gets beat up by this guy, some of his goons, and then Joel hears about it. In the game, Joel goes after him, finds him, like
Proceeds to kick some ass.
brutalizes him, like he breaks his leg, breaks his nose. It just shows Joel is like does not care about doing whatever it takes.
He's a shell of what he was in the
Yeah.
intro from like a loving father.
In the TV show, Kyle, what happens is on their way to go find him, they go into the Firefly place and he's already dead. And then that leads to them finding Ellie. So we don't get to see Joel be
That transformation.
ruthless. Yeah. But they kind of supplement it with another scene, which I don't think works quite as well.
No.
Because it's emotionally triggered versus the other one was just him being him.
I also felt like, correct me if I'm wrong, like in the show, they really rushed to the point of like her being the cure. Versus in the games, you kind of find that out a little more towards the midpoint, right? Like it's kind of implied, but it's not
Well-
explicit. Like we have explicit evidence that she's infected and she's already healed from it, and so she's somehow immune to this.
Yeah, but that's
You do find out pretty quick. I think. Okay, so spoiler alert again. I think the big reveal, like you find out pretty quick that she's immune. The real like what the fuck moment is when you find out that she needs to die in order for them to do what they want to do.
And I think since we've played the game, we know that she's the cure. But if I'm thinking about it correctly, they never said she was the cure. You just know that she's immune and they're trying to move her west.
Right.
So you don't know that she's the cure. You just know that she's immune.
Yeah, but if you've
don't
ever
have-
watched any zombies thing, then it's like we could
Yeah.
take that, and so you kind of, I just felt like, for me, I don't know, maybe I'm totally wrong, but I just felt like playing through the games, that was more of a early to mid point thing that you sort of found out, and in this one it was like entry. It was like, oh, yeah, I was bit, I'm healed. Here I was scanned. Yeah, I'm infected still, but it's not affecting me, and we're good to go.
I could
And
be
I'm
wrong
like, oh.
too, but I think Marlene in the game tells you that pretty early on.
Yeah, well, and you do know pretty early because otherwise, why is Tess so adamant that you
About you
continue the
protecting
mission? Yeah, so I'm pretty
That's
sure
true,
you
I
know.
guess. That is true.
Unless I think maybe Tess just knows.
Does the girl even know, though? Wait, does Ellie know?
She knows she's immune.
She knows
Yeah.
too?
Yeah.
Okay.
But she doesn't know that they're gonna have to kill her.
Well, nobody knows
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Except for us.
But so Kyle, what they supplement that scene with is you meet this guard that Joel is smuggling stuff to, and the guard is like kind of his friend, kind of not. And then when they're escaping from the quarantine zone, they run into that guard, and he's like, what, you guys can't be out here. He's like, I'm doing everything by the book. I'm gonna, check if you're infected. He goes down the line, gets to Ellie, and then Ellie stabs him, and then like Joel has a flashback to when the guard shot his daughter,
Yeah.
and then Joel goes and like punches his face in multiple times, and that's what I don't like it as much, but that's what they supplemented it with.
If I have to, the reason that I think that scene works so well in the game is because a lot of the story, yes, it's about Ellie, but a lot of the story of The Last of Us is sort of Joel regaining his humanity. Ellie brought him back from being just a product of this world. And I think that emphasized it really well in the game was because he didn't give a fuck. Like this person did not deserve what he did to that guy. At least in the game, I haven't seen. And I remember first time I played that, I was like, Jesus, this is a little intense.
Makes you kind of feel like a bad guy.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree with you that I don't know if that would work quite as well, considering that it's still a reaction to his like love for his daughter,
Mm-hmm.
versus in the game by that point
It's just who he is.
he probably doesn't really love anything.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they decided to back step on that a little bit, to change it a little bit. I don't know. We'll see.
But as far as things that were like the game, that I really loved, like little things like when Ellie what's his daughter's name? You said
Sarah.
When Sarah gets in the car and they're driving, the camera work is just like the game.
Yep.
And I
Yeah.
was so happy seeing that, like, how it rotates around in the back seat.
Yeah, and you control
That's what
her.
they do. And it's so
Is there, like,
perfect.
The burning barn or whatever.
Yeah, there's the burning
house
barn, and it's rotating in the back seat. And then, although in the game, don't they get hit by the car?
Yes, and they didn't.
They
And
do
you-
a fake out. The
and
car,
you have to kick the window out.
yeah, the car almost hits them, but
Yep.
it doesn't. Instead, they have a plane crash,
Yes.
and a piece of the plane somehow flips the car over.
Damn.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
totally. Yeah.
A little over the top.
But I really enjoyed it, and I'd recommend anybody who's a fan of the game watch it. Even if you're not a fan and you just like zombies, you're in for a ride. It's going to be a great zombie story if they follow the game.
Talk about how good that game was at world building, though. Like when you're playing as Sarah in the first game, and you're like watching the news report. It's like 2 a.m, and you hear they don't know what's going on, and it's like the local news, and then you just hear you just see like an explosion
The
happen,
gas station.
and then just, and then the station just turns into static, and you're like walking around like, what the hell? Like, first time I ever played that, I remember thinking holy shit, this is intense. Like, what is happening?
This is happening in the real. Yeah, absolutely. That
Yeah.
first hour and a half was like balls to the wall.
Yeah, and I did
crazy.
not think they were gonna take Sarah out like that right off the bat. Right
Gets
off the
me
rip.
every time. I tear up.
Yeah, I didn't have a reaction watching the TV series, but the game is different.
TV series, I did get a reaction. I thought, and I think for me personally, it's the acting. And I think both the game and the in-person, I think the acting was spectacular of somebody grieving somebody and then somebody realistically dying. Not, you are my favorite.
Yeah.
No, she's like
I'll always
panicking
remember
and
you,
like
Dad.
Like, what
hyperventilating.
just happened?
Yeah.
And
I
he's
did-
like freaking out because his,
Of course. I did think it was weird though, like when he's running out basically in an open field in the show, and all of a sudden like the trooper or whatever is right there, and telling him to freeze or whatever, and obviously he has to kill them. But then all of a sudden he like ducks right and he finds like this ditch. And you're like, dude, you're in a fucking flat field. Like, where did this huge ditch come from? Versus the game, like, he's in a ravine where it's like
he's
there's a lot of
climbing up a ravine
yeah,
to the
exactly.
fence, yeah.
So he could dive back and stuff. So it made a lot more sense. But I remember watching. I'm like, how is he gonna fucking get out of this one? And then, of course, he just falls right, and it's a 30-foot fucking ditch out of nowhere. It's like, okay, that field was flat. Where
One
did that
thing,
come from?
and I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, but I read this person's take on it, and they said that what they liked better in the game with that scene that didn't happen in the show, and maybe it did in this person because I haven't seen it yet, but they said in the show the soldier, there's some hesitation, but then they ultimately just shoot. In the game, there's actually a moment where he's talking to his superiors, and he says, he's like, there's 2 people. No, I don't think so. Sir, there's a little girl. And then he goes, okay. And he does all of that, when he's talking, and apparently that didn't happen in the show.
He does it, but not as good.
No, not nearly as good, because there was in the game he kicks back but it's a girl, there's a human. He in the show, if I remember correctly, he identifies a man and a girl.
Doesn't he say, I think all he says is, are you sure?
Yeah.
And then that's it.
Yeah, in the game he goes, sir, there's a little girl.
Yeah, you can tell
you
the
can see
humanity.
he's please don't make me do this. Yeah. So, but that is pretty nitpicky to start nitpicking little things like that. But sometimes
Yeah,
those
but,
are what makes the scene though.
No, it is, and it's just why change it? You know that they studied this thing over and over.
Well, and it's
Why
Neil
change that
Druckmann.
little-
It's the same people. Yeah, they're doing the show and the
yeah,
game.
why change that little detail? What more did you think you got out of it? I don't know.
This might be their opportunity.
Especially the opening scene,
Yeah.
because that is one of the greatest openers in video game history, I would say. Like, they nailed it for the most part, but there was still some moments where it's like, really? That's weird. So if you're going to copy it, like, copy it. But, again, it's nitpicky. It was still really good.
So
I read one review that said it's a better version of The Walking Dead. And so
I liked The Walking Dead for about the first season and a half, 2 seasons. And then
I would
fucking
say
quickly fell off that train.
3 seasons for me, and then I stopped watching it. Like it's like it just ended actually. I think on season 11. I stopped watching it like season 7, but I actually didn't. I didn't really enjoy it since like season 3.
Dude, I got to the point where I was like, this is such a cyclical show. Like, you already know what's going to happen. Like, so I would just watch the last episode of the season
Yeah.
and be like, oh, they joined this group. Oh, they turned on
The
them.
whole thing.
Oh, it's bad. Oh, and that person died. Okay, next.
Every
They joined this group. It's
Walking Dead was literally like, holy fuck, what do we do? Okay, we found this place. Let's survive. Here's a bad guy. Everything goes to hell. Okay, let's move. Holy fuck, what do we do?
Yeah.
We found this place. Gotta survive. Found the bad guy. Everything goes to hell. And then they move. Every time there's a big bad guy, they bring in another person that's an even bigger bad guy.
Yep.
And it just,
and then somehow, what's the main guy? Rick somehow assumes power in the place, and he's running it for a little bit, and then
He always
gets overthrown,
somehow-
has a mental break.
he always like, he goes back and forth between it being a complete bitch and then being
Simp. Yeah.
complete alpha. Like there's no in between. He's either like beta male Rick or a Sigma Chad Rick. Like
no
there's
shit.
there's no in between, and there's no story arc to get him. He just goes back and forth.
Is that show done?
I
don't
They
even
got
know.
spin-offs and stuff, but like I think the main series just ended.
Yeah, I wonder how it ended.
I don't know, to be
I
honest with
gave
you.
up on it. It was like, this show is
I
so
officially
fucking
gave up
unoriginal at this point.
With the whole Negan storyline, it was
Was that
just,
the cannibals?
No, that's just after the cannibals. But it was written just so poorly
Dude.
that I just it took me out of it.
And then like random characters would just like come back like, oh, it's like if you didn't explicitly see their face getting eaten off, you knew, and like, you know, they'd go into a movie and then maybe come back in 2 seasons. Like,
Well, same thing.
I've been fucking surviving.
I didn't watch it, but they killed Rick off in like season 9.
Oh, okay.
They killed him off, and then randomly in the very last episode of season 11, they show him and he's been surviving this whole time.
God, dude.
And like he's all rugged looking, like he's just a wild man now. And I'm like, okay, this is. So hopefully it doesn't fall into that, because I don't know what their plan is with The Last of Us. There's really not a lot of source material to go off of after they finish the main story of the game. So I don't know if this is going to be like a mini series that they plan on being like a one and done. I don't know if they're going to try and stretch this out.
I think just from what I see is there's probably just going to be 1 season.
I think
That
I'm
would be my
okay with the
gut.
one and done.
Yeah.
And then they might do like a
A spin-off
spin-off of like that same world now that it's built out, you know?
with like completely
different new
unrelated
character
to the
set.
game's characters.
Yeah,
I'd be
exactly.
okay with that.
Like from this Fedra camp, it was, you know, these people growing up or whatever. Sure.
So we'll see.
Yeah, but I definitely recommend it. Go check
We'll
it
have to
out.
check it out. I'll watch it. There'll be another episode by the time we record
Yeah.
next week, so I'll get caught up.
And the thing with this, it's a weekly release, which I still feel is kind of weird in today's
I
streaming
know, what is
world,
this?
But
2010? what we got here? What's it?
I don't like it. Like,
yeah,
Lord of the Rings was this way, The Rings of Power, and that's a show I want to binge. That's not a show that I want to wait. And I get it probably does better for ratings because each episode gets the
anticipation.
hype and you get the content from it and blah blah blah. But
rather than a week or two of hype,
and then it's
spread out
moved
over
on.
11 weeks. or whatever.
I don't know. Does that actually work though? I feel like if you binge something and spent like your weekend watching it, you're gonna be much more likely to tell someone about it than like a random show that you watch for an hour, on a Wednesday or whatever. So, well, Dylan, where can people find us?
They can find us on Instagram, Twitter, as well as YouTube, all under Katie Ratio Podcast, and then any major platform for listening to
So
podcasts.
much build up. Any major platform.
I know.
Just
I'm
so you know
hyped.
how hyped I am about the podcast platforms. But if you're on listening to us now, you're probably already on a podcast platform. So thank you for listening. Leave us a comment, like, subscribe.
That's right.
Chat with us on Instagram or Twitter. We're active there.
The whole 9.
We like to put memes sometimes. There's a pretty funny one we put up of William recently where he looks like a character from Elden Ring. And not a cool character, by the way.
I think they're cool.
Thanks.
What are their Albinauric?
Albinaurics.
Yeah.
All right. And
They give you 1/2 of the Halig Tree medallion, so
Wait, so what are the people that like crawl around?
there's phases.
Oh,
Albinaurics.
so you have a huge head and then you just lose it?
Yeah, they're like different. I think there's different levels of like, because they're tortured and enslaved like species. So I think there's different levels to it, and those are the ones that are crawling like have been basically suffering from this sickness for the longest.
Why does their head
That's what
shrink
they're
so much?
reduced to. I think actually that's a mask that they wear.
Oh,
they're born to be farmed.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
I'm pretty sure because you can put that mask on. I'm pretty sure it's a mask
Or
that
do you
they
just
cover
wear
up.
their head?
I don't know.
I don't want to get us. I don't want to get us off topic.
Yeah.
But have you seen that meme where it's like, you can't tell me that this is the same species, and it's that albinauric woman who's all hot, and then the albinauric, it's like a little toad.
Yes, they are. But anyways, come join us for the next episode of Podcast and Stream.
That's right, baby.
And remember, with a good KD, you get the
Dub.
yes.
Bye,
Bye, guys.